You know, this isn't just another story about strange lights in the sky. This is a real cold case, straight out of the Cold War. We're talking about a file that's packed with conflicting reports, a super-fast military lockdown, and an official story that, for a lot of people, just never quite added up. Welcome to the Kecksburg Incident.
So, to really get what happened here, you've got to picture the world in 1965. Tensions were incredibly high. The threat of nuclear war was a real, everyday fear. And because of that, every single blip on a radar screen, any unidentified object in the sky, was treated as a potential threat to national security. The entire world was basically holding its breath.
And right in the middle of all that tension, our story unfolds. Something, and to this day nobody can agree on what, fell out of the sky and landed in the woods near this tiny town, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. The question that's been bouncing around for decades is pretty simple. What was it?
Okay, so the first piece of this puzzle didn't happen on the ground. It actually happened up in the sky, where literally thousands of people across North America saw this brilliant fireball that seemed to defy every logical explanation.
And look, this wasn't just some quick flash in the pan. This was a huge event. People saw it all the way from Canada, down through Michigan, and into Ohio. But the really critical part of this story, the part that makes this different, happens in those last few moments over Pennsylvania. Multiple witnesses on the ground said the same thing. This thing wasn't just falling. It looked like it was being controlled. It seemed to slow down, maneuver, and make a guided descent right into those woods.
Well, pretty soon, that object in the sky became a very real object on the ground. And the first people to get to the crash site, they weren't scientists, they weren't the military, they were just local folks, volunteer firefighters.
And what they described is just wild because of how consistent they all were. They said it wasn't a crater with a bunch of debris. No, it was a single, solid object, maybe the size of a VW Beetle, shaped like a giant acorn. They said it looked like it was made of one seamless piece of bronze-colored metal. No rivets, no welds, nothing. And then there's the weirdest part, a band of symbols, almost like hieroglyphics, running around the base.
So this really unique acorn or bell shape has sent researchers down this fascinating, though I gotta say, pretty speculative historical rabbit hole. It looks remarkably similar to something called Die Glocke, or the bell, which was supposedly an experimental craft from Nazi Germany. Now let's be super clear, this is an unproven concept. There's absolutely no hard evidence connecting the two. But for a lot of people looking into this case, that visual similarity is just too strong to completely ignore. So you had these locals checking things out in the woods, but that did not last long at all. What happened next is honestly one of the most baffling parts of this whole story. The military showed up, and they were exceptionally fast and incredibly thorough.
I mean, they were on site with what seemed like impossible speed, and they weren't messing around. They immediately set up a hard perimeter, roadblocks went up, the whole area was sealed off, and then they told everyone to get out, and that included the local firefighters who were already there. To top it all off, witnesses later reported seeing a military flatbed truck driving away from the woods, carrying a big, tarp-covered object.
Yeah, there was no pretty please about it. The military just took total control and ordered all the local authorities to leave the scene. You can just imagine what those folks were thinking, right? This massive response just felt way, way out of proportion for what the government would later call just a piece of space junk.
And this is really where the whole mystery gets locked in. Because from this point on, you have two completely different stories about what happened that night, and they just can't both be true.
I mean, it's like they're describing two totally different events. On one side, you have the eyewitnesses who said it was a controlled descent. On the other, the official story calls it a random re-entry. Witnesses saw a solid, acorn-shaped object. The government says, probably just satellite pieces or meteor fragments. The locals reported a soft landing. The official narrative suggests a high-speed crash. And that huge military response? That was just a routine investigation. It just doesn't line up.
And you know that main official story, the one about the Soviet satellite Cosmos 96? Well, it's got a huge hole in it. Independent orbital data shows that satellite actually re-entered the atmosphere over Canada hours before the Kecksburg fireball was even seen. The timeline, the location, it just doesn't work.
So why are we still talking about this so many decades later? It's simple, really. The official file on Kecksburg is basically a block of Swiss cheese. It's just full of holes.
Seriously, this case is wide open because the official record is a black box. Key military documents that should exist, well, they're either lost or were never filed in the first place. The reports we do have often contradict each other. A whole bunch of files are still classified under national security. And maybe most important of all,
No one has ever seen a single piece of what they pulled out of those woods. There's no physical evidence to close the case.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The real mystery of Kecksburg isn't about some wild claim. It's about the massive gap between what people saw with their own two eyes and what they were told by officials. It's about that persistent, decades-long silence. The unexplained actions are what keep all the questions alive.
So when you put it all together, the eyewitnesses, the massive military response, the shaky official story, it all brings you back to one simple question. If this was just a meteor or a bit of random space junk, why all the secrecy? If nothing truly unusual happened in those Pennsylvania woods, then why, after all this time, does this story absolutely refuse to go away?